Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this European Caucus session. My name is John Engström, and I'll guide you through this session, which will be rather different from a lot of the other sessions that you will attend during this conference, because as you see, there's no big panel sitting up here, and that is because this session is all about giving you all from European countries the chance to share your experiences, discuss and learn from each other. So this is an opportunity to have a debate. So in this session, we will actually only have short interventions and listen to each other, ask questions, hear what has been successful one place might be a good idea for someone else to take on, what has not been a success, what has been problems, obstacles, because if we share the problems as well, perhaps you will see that there's some other partners who have experienced the same things and might have found a way around it or through it, actually. So it's an opportunity to learn from each other and discuss what we think is important in respect of our European countries within this OGP. So there will be no long interventions, no long presentations. I would like just to, as an introduction or as sort of a subtitle, I would like to quote two short sentences from the UK Minister for the Cabinet Office, Francis Maude. He, from a speech recently, he said, "Making commitments to greater openness and engaging with your citizens is the great opportunity for governments of the future." And then, "Transparency is the friend of the reformer." Short and to the core of the whole OGP, I think. So it's a good starting point for the perspectives and things we would like to discuss also in this session amongst ourselves. I think for this session, for this discussion, I seem to think there are a few goals and ambitions that would be good to have in mind. For it's an opportunity to share experiences from each other's countries. What seems to work well, what doesn't seem to work so well. And then for all members of the OGP, we have to make an action plan. So the experiences we have from making action plans and implementing the topics and issues and ambitions that we have put into these action plans would in itself be interesting and an important part of the discussion. And towards the end of our discussion, I will try and remind you that we should also look ahead. What would you think would be important and useful to discuss in future regional caucuses? So what would be issues to address next time we meet in a European session like this? And I hope also that there will be someone present who would consider hosting a new session within the end of next year. So that would be sort of what could be items for the discussion today. Now, as for the near future, I've got one piece of information that you would like to know. As from 2014, there will be a rotating membership of the OGP Steering Committee. That means some countries will go out to the Steering Committee and leave room for other countries to apply for membership from 2014 onwards. The procedures and how to apply for this and when you have to apply for this will be laid out in a short time, I think. So I would advise you who are interested in joining the steering committee, look at the website, and I'm sure there will be some procedures laid out there of how to do this and when you have to apply. I have, just to start us off, as I said, there will not be a panel of speakers that you can listen to, but just to start us off, I have asked two members here to give a short starting point of our discussion. And the way we're going to do this is, while I speak, you can give me a sign, just raise a hand, and I'll try and take note of who wants to have its intervention. So we'll start the discussion after that. And then just wait for the microphone to be handed out, because there are people here with microphones. And state your name, who you represent, and then we'll have a discussion from there. So the action plans would be one major important part of our discussion, I hope, and I think there's a good way of thinking about this would be to sort of differentiate between the process of making an action plan, how to involve organizations and the civil society with government in that process of making the plans. What is the best way of doing that? And then the other part of these action plans are, of course, the content, which are the important topics. But it could be a good idea to try and differentiate between the process, involvement, participation, and what is actually important topics and issues and goals to set into these plans. With these few words, I will introduce to you Mr. Raudu Pukiu, State Secretary of the Ministry of Chancellery of the Government of Romania. So please, Mr. Pukiu.
Good morning, everybody. So yes, it's Pukiu actually, but it's a hard name even for Romanians. Thank you for coming. Wow, I see a lot of people at this time of the day when Mr. Engström gave me the opportunity to speak in front of in this meeting of European region. I tell what time is it? 8 o'clock. Oh, would be somebody in the room at that time, but I'm pretty impressed and I thank you all for coming here. Well, I took this opportunity to speak about the OGP in Romania, but not to focus on how our country deal with the OGP or the commitments there or the action plans and how it was implemented, but also to address some which I believe they're common issues for all across Europe. So briefly, just to put you on a background about Romania. Romania signed for the OGP in 2011 in November, and the National Action Plan was approved approved in April 2012. The national action plan has had three major components. For 2012, assuming responsibility, in order to have people responsible in each ministry to take care of these OGP commitments and building, let's say, the infrastructure to opening the data and so on. For 2013 to standardize these procedures, and for 2014 to maximize the results. But I believe what I would like to have is a good discussion about what, and I will start with this, what didn't work so well in our OGP action plan implementation. First of all, it was the beginning of the implementation of OGP in 2012, which didn't work so well. It's a first phase which was not very coordinated inside the government. We have 2 rounds of election in 2012, which will make this implementation very complicated. So it's one of the issues, I believe it's across Europe as well. How do you deal with the changes of government? How you maintain the same level of importance of the OGP and transparency across the governments? And I'm speaking here probably, it's applied more on the Eastern European, Central European countries more than Western European countries, but I think it's a common issue. Also, understanding the importance of open data. This is it was like a new thing for most of public servants in the administration in Romania. The open data was raising a lot of questions rather than answers, and there was a big effort to make this open data explained and understood as much as possible. Also, an important thing for Romania, which is somehow we had to deal with it very, very often, is the transparency that is still not generally embraced. And the public administration in Romania is rather closed one than an open one. And this is about how the things work from the past. You know, it's a lot of problems coming from the years we've been passing. So it's like a new democracy somehow in many points of view. But the public administration was not so open. So it's an important issue we had to address. There are things that went good, and this I will mention some of them because they are important on how we made this even and this with this addressing these complicated issues. We just managed to make them happen and to make these commitments happen. What went good? And it's important from the even at the beginning of the National Action Plan, how it was implemented, is the inclusion in the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. And colleagues from Ministry of Justice did a lot of work on doing this. Practically, it was important. We had to address this subject of anti-corruption, dealing with it at the European level, and we built a national anti-corruption strategy, but one of the components there is dedicated to open government partnership and to open data and transparency. So it was important for us in terms of empowering somehow the commitments and in the OGP. Also in 2013, the Prime Minister Chancellery took the coordination of the OGP implementation in Romania. This is one of the important steps we took because we took it at the Prime Minister level as a commitment, as a topic, and I believe it helped a lot. Until then, being in dealing with a lot of ministries and a lot of topics didn't work so well. So I told you about the first phase implementation, which was not so good. Also, what went good is the launch of the open data portal, which we managed to do this month. Data.gov.ro it's open now. Not publishing so many data sets now, but it was an important commitment we took, and we launched it this month. Also, what was important from the very beginning, and we focused on that as well, to have joint meetings between the NGOs and the ministries, and also the IT community involved into these meetings. There are very focused meetings on open data. There are very focused meetings on which data the IT community would like to have from the ministries and so on. So we spent a lot of time on visiting all the ministries into this in this formula, but the results came after all. So it was a good thing we had. The main challenges for the future, and I believe this can be a common subject to discuss today, and we are focused on. It's the cultural change we try to do in the public administration. From a public administration, it's pretty close to an open one. It's a long way. And the cultural changes are not coming very quickly, but it needs a lot of steady efforts and also high-level commitment. And it's important from our point of view, and for the public administration in Romania, we saw this as very important. The high-level commitment made the things change faster. Also, we have to focus on two, let's say, technical things, but they are very important in the success of OGP and implementation of the action plan. Is the quality of people involved, and it's very important to find those people enthusiastic and willing to do and to embrace this open data in the ministries. It's very important to have these people in our point of view, and also to focus on another technical issue, which is the quantity and the quality of the open data. Sometimes the open data in the ministry, they are so like an extra job for them. Just opening the data is okay, I have to do another thing. This is not the goal. So you have to focus on open as much data as you want, but also to have a feedback mechanism to say, look, this data was not so good. So just try to address this thing. These are the issues we will focus on the next year. Hopefully, we'll speed up the process, and we'll have most of our national action plan finished by the end of the next year, which is we have also reporting mechanism that will be in place the next year, and we'll have to check on that. But these are the main issue we had. So these topics, I believe, they are common topics for everybody across Europe. And I would like to take the opportunity to answer the question, but also listen from other countries with their experience into this. And I believe if we're talking about European region, this would be one of the things I would like to have in this room and another meeting the next year, not only to exchange best practices, let's say, across governments, but to use these best practices in other countries. So if one country has a good experience in implementing one commitment, probably, and another country has difficulties in that, to make this exchange happen faster, so we can connect directly. It's very important to have this. I would like to share from our experience, from good things, but also there are a lot of things that didn't work so well, so I would like to have the experience of other countries, but there on the spot, I mean, in that context, because sometimes, you know, best practices apply on one context in one country, not all across Europe, but I believe that if we provide the context and the other countries provide the best practices, we can make a good story out of it. Thank you very much once again.
Well, thank you, Mr. Puccio. You gave us some key words and some experiences that I'm sure that others here today could comment on. Now, the one interesting thing about this concept of the OGP is that it gives us the opportunity of the representatives from governments, NGOs, organizations, and also multilateral organizations can actually meet in the same room, and we can have the discussion and exchange our views and experiences. So it's very appropriate, I think, that as the next speaker to start us off, I've invited Helen Derbyshire from Access Info Europe. So Helen, what do you think would be main issues, and what are your experiences and things you want to challenge us?
Thank you very much indeed, John. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I think one of the most important questions I heard yesterday, asked by Beth Novak, was what gets you out of bed in the morning? We were having a little debate about this on Twitter, and I said that it was using the right of access to information as an instrumental right to defend human rights, promote democracy. I don't know what your reasons are. Maybe it's the nice picture of the cup of coffee we saw there. That was very tempting. But it's fantastic that so many of you did get out of bed in the morning to be here to discuss, especially on this sort of slightly misty November morning as it is now, which is a holiday in many countries in this region as well. That was a great commitment, I think, for many people to come on what was a national holiday. What I want to do is just very briefly to kick the debate off, is talk a little, or get us thinking a little bit about the specificities of the European region. What are the kind of things that we might want to take into consideration as the European regional group, which are different from other regions? There's a huge amount we have in common, including in our engagement in this open government partnership process for both governments and civil society. I think it was a huge scramble at the beginning when the whole thing got launched and up and running to get the action plans together, to figure out what it was all about, to figure out how to get engaged. From the civil society perspective, also to get the money to get to Brasilia last year or to London now, which some groups haven't been able to do, in fact. So there are lots of things we have in common with our colleagues from all around the world. We have adopted action plans with less than perfect consultation mechanisms, which don't always contain commitments which are strictly speaking open government. Too much e-government, perhaps, not enough open government. So to that, we've got all in common. What's different about Europe? I think one thing is that this region has a particularly long tradition of open government. We have the world's first access to information law from 1766. And we've got countries which have been trying to do openness and participation for a very long time. We also have countries in the region, however. We have the new democracies that, Rada, you referred to, which are still relatively young democracies. But we also have countries which are which are still trying to find their place. The country that I live and work in, Spain, still does not have an access to information law. So we go from countries which have the oldest ones to countries with no legal mechanisms for transparency yet. It's in the pipeline, but it's a very developed region, economically developed region, which I think gives huge possibilities in terms of making full use of the promises offered by new technologies, having the resources to carry out participatory processes. At the same time, it's a region which is being rocked very badly by the financial crisis. And that financial crisis is putting a strain not only on the ability of governments to dedicate money to doing open government, to opening up, to investing, for example, in cleaning up data sets for release, or in investing in complex consultation mechanisms in restructuring, although that's perhaps, it's also the time, the crisis is the time to address some of these issues. It's also a crisis which is putting a strain on and creating a threat in some ways to our democratic values. We talk a lot in Europe about the democratic deficit. We've seen the very rushed decision-making related to the crisis, which has kind of bypassed our traditional decision-making mechanisms, sometimes taking decisions outside the normal checks and balances which parliaments the role that parliaments are supposed to play, out of the need to take rapid decisions to try to address the crisis. We've seen, in the context of the crisis, increasing racism and xenophobia. And a fear with the European Parliament elections next year that we're going to have more political parties elected which are really not that in favour of open government. And that's an important consideration. How do we address that? Are we doing it right? Are we bringing the populations along with us? Would everyone else be ready to get out of bed at 8 o'clock on a rainy Friday morning in London to talk about open government? Do people care? Or are people disillusioned, disenchanted, frustrated? And I think one of the challenges that's very specific to this region is the complexity of the decision-making processes. I know that we're talking about a region which is wider than the European Union. Nevertheless, the existence of Brussels, of the EU, with the decisions that go through it, affects not only the 28, but it has a wider impact on our laws and policies. My organisation, Access Info Europe, just won a case against the Council of the European Union to get access to a document. What did we want to know? We simply wanted to know which countries were putting forward amendments to amend the EU's transparency rules. Because we wanted to be able to engage in that process. It was a 5-year legal battle which ended on the 17th of October at the European Court of Justice, saying that we had a right of access to that document. And the judgment from the court is beautiful because it talks about the link between transparency, participation, and accountability. The point I'm making with giving that example of that court case is that it's not something we've yet secured totally clearly yet in Europe. We still have a lot of work to do. We have coming out of the EU and all the laws which are adopted from the EU, which, as I say, help influence the legal framework not only at the national level but more widely, we have particular pieces of legislation which nowhere else in the world has. I won't go into details and bore you with it, but we have something called the Directive on the Reuse of Public Sector Information, which is confusing the picture for many public officials and encouraging charging. Just at the time when under open government we're talking about open data and dropping charges on information, we have an EU directive which makes it look like perhaps we could or should be charging for access, and which encourages government officials to ask, why do you want the information, which is something which is in direct conflict with our laws on the right of access to information, our freedom of information laws. We have issues of privacy. Somebody yesterday, by the end of the day, finally someone mentioned the elephant in the room, which is the surveillance issue, and it was great that they did that. It is a bit of an elephant, I would say. We have a region, Europe, which is shocked by the revelations that from the Snowden disclosures about spying and surveillance, and yet at the same time there is a European Union directive on data retention, which has been struck down by constitutional courts in some countries, in Germany, and now the EU has an infringement procedure against Germany for not implementing EU law. So we've got some very important tensions, and the issue of privacy, the issue of data retention is definitely an issue which, as when we're talking about open government, we have to take into consideration as well. So there are just a few of the challenges. I should also mention the other regional body, the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe, with its very significant body of human rights rules, the European Court of Human Rights, which in 2009, and then again this June, ruled that the right of access to information, so transparency as a right linked to freedom of expression and enshrined in the European Human Rights Convention. That's very important. So what we're doing here with the Open Government Partnership, we're not only looking at transparency, accountability and participation as something voluntary, we're actually implementing rights which the International Human Rights Tribunals are now recognising as the fundamental rights of European citizens. That's an important consideration, and it's where Europe is and could continue to take a lead, not just for this region, but globally. And so those are some thoughts that I think we can discuss. I think that's, overall, it's a very positive picture, and there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot to build on. I've got up on the screen a website that we've developed, Open Government Standards. We've been working to define more specifically from the civil society perspective, more specifically, what is open government? What do we mean by open government? And I like the picture that we've got from our video, which is of, I guess she's a doctor probably, little Red Cross of a hospital. Why is government important? It's not only, why is open government important? It's not only about releasing data for business, although I agree, particularly in the context of the crisis, that's important, but it's also about ensuring that the health systems, which Europe should be very proud of as a world leader in having public health systems, how do we defend those in times of crisis? And really to finish, because I know we want to open up the debate, I strongly support from the civil society perspective, and we discussed this in some civil society fora yesterday, strongly support having more networking regional meetings. It was very useful to have the meeting that the Croatian government hosted in Dubrovnik to bring together the European countries. I see nodding, that's great. We also had a meeting in Rome in December of last year, which was a smaller meeting but equally useful, and thanks to the Italian government for pulling that together. So yes, let's have some regional discussions so that we can, in a focused way, address some of these very specific issues and also find out, in a contribution to the bigger open government partnership, how to exploit and make the most of all the very strong tradition that Europe has of transparency, accountability and participation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Helen. That was important perspectives and key words. So, who wants to start off and have some comments from either what you've just heard or from other perspectives that you would like to bring into this discussion? Yes, first one of the microphone, name and who you represent, please.
Is it on? Yeah. Good morning, everybody. It's early, but it's an interesting session. My name is Terje Dyrstad. I work in the Norwegian Ministry of Government Administration, Reform and Church Affairs. And thank you to John, and thank you to the two, what should you say, keynotes, but interesting interventions. I would like to reflect a little bit on coordination and cooperation. If you look at the Norwegian, let's say, what we learned. Because it's coordination both between the ministries and between the ministries and the civil society. Try to merge. That is one lesson learned. Have meetings together with the ministries and the civil society. And when it comes to the the coordination. Try to find the right spot to coordinate. Who should coordinate? We started with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we learned after a year that maybe it's not the right place to coordinate. And we moved to my ministry, and we think that that was better. So find the right place to who should coordinate. And don't try to plan yourself to success. Jump on the train at once. We say in Norway, the road is being built while you are walking. Just start with the action plan, and it will be better and better as long as you work. Thank you.
Yes, over there, please. Right over there.
Thank you very much. My name is Francesco Checchi. I work for the UNDP in a regional center that covers Eastern Europe and CIS. And I run a program on anti-corruption. And I've been working quite a lot on the implementation of the UN Convention Against Corruption. And we have a chapter in the convention that is about prevention. And there are many things which are actually overlapping with what's the activities and the scope of the Open Government Partnership. And we have found a lot of resistance in the implementation of the convention. And the convention also has an implementation and enforcement mechanism, which is actually a little bit stronger than the one that the OGP has, in my opinion. It's maybe debatable, but I think it's true. So when we talk about enforcement, when we talk about evaluation, what is that really is added in relation to what was there before? And I ask particularly to the governments, what are they going to add that would improve the mechanism for evaluation and for implementation of these action plans that was not there before, because there are missing elements in implementation of this convention. So I don't know. My question is directed mostly to the governments.
Well, this must be interesting for many countries, this drive against corruption, but then there are other forces that work in another direction. That's what you're really making as a point, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think is, which way are we going? Because Helen, you also spoke about the financial crisis. We're driven back sort of in important democratic features right now. So is the OGP, this concept, is it helping or is it just irrelevant? Which way are we actually heading? Yes, at the back, please.
My name is Brendan Howlin. I'm the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, a new ministry that we created in Ireland 2.5 years ago. And I'm very taken by Helen's contribution because I think we shouldn't segment, and it just goes to the question that's just been asked, segment economic recovery, which has been certainly the focus of the government I'm a member of, from political and institutional recovery. Because what happened in my country and in many other countries was an economic failure, but coupled with a political and administrative failure. Politics failed, and the institutions of oversight that people depended upon failed. So we can't simply repair one of them, we have to repair all of them. That was the analysis certainly we made in Ireland. So the perversity of having a ministry that was charged with economic management, but at the same time, institutional and political reform, called the Department of Reform, was part of our integrated response. The only point I really want to make is you can't sort of set aside the repairing of transparency and broken government until you get the economics right. And I think the imperative of focusing on economic recovery has blinded some to that. And the very final comment, I'm very taken again by the point that Helen made, two subsets of it. One, the urgency of what needed to be done economically, fast-track decision-making in a way that none of us are really comfortable with. And secondly, it certainly, let me use a diplomatic word since we're still in a programme in Ireland, mitigated the norms of democratic accountability when a bureaucracy in the Troika determines not only economic policy, but sometimes a range of other policies that affect society in general. And we need, when we get out of this crisis, to stand back a little bit and do some reflection on how to make those institutions, including the Commission and the IMF, more accountable in the countries where they operate. Thank you.
Yes. Because this is the threats, perhaps, against participation as we want to have them in the society. That it's also a matter of trust, isn't it? There was one gentleman over there. Please.
Hi, my name is Christian Heiser. I'm from Germany. It's pretty tough to speak after that strong statement. I mean, I totally agree. But as I come from Germany, and the question was raised, what the open government can bring to a country. I mean, for us in Germany, it would be great to have a structured dialogue between the government and civil society. And this would be like a big advantage. And I mean, you probably all have that already, but we don't have it. And this is like a thing which I promise for myself and for the civil society in Germany to get if we join the OGP soon, hopefully. So please help us and push it forward.
Then there was one at the back with the blue shirt, please. And then you.
Thanks very much. Good morning. My name's Simon Wilson. I'm from a network called In Business for Good. We're a network of small businesses based in the UK, but increasingly reaching out to Europe and beyond. And I really want to follow up on the point that the Minister was making from Ireland about the link between the economic, the social, and open government. I suspect in every country represented here, small businesses make up the most employment, the most economic activity. And they're also the most socially involved in their local communities. So that's where activity is taking place in local communities. And when we consult small businesses about this agenda, first of all, of course, they've never heard of the Open Government Partnership. But secondly, they feel excluded from information and knowledge which affect them in their capacity as economic decision makers and as social players. So it's really just to make the point that I think if we're going to create this movement, it needs to take account of the role in particular of small businesses who don't have the access that big corporates already have to government, and also who have a potential role to play in civil society. I think that's quite a difficult thing to do, but if that doesn't happen, we are going to miss the big story in terms of both economic development and openness. Thank you.
Well, Simon, could I just ask, do you mean, do we lack arenas for that participation, and what do you say?
I think it's more a sense of lacking the feeling of being listened to and of being involved. So, of course, there are many business representative organisations which certainly in the UK do a great job. But when you talk to businesses, they feel that their relationship with the state is about being regulated, is about people coming in and expecting them, and of course paying taxes, and that they are not heard, their voices are not heard. And there is also, and I hesitate to say this is a perception, a sense that the deals are stitched up with big business behind closed doors in a non-transparent way, and yet small businesses have the biggest impact on economies locally. So it is partly perception, but I believe also there is a failure to join up the different institutions and mechanisms that could make openness a reality for small businesses. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, thank you. Lady just behind there, in the black dress, please.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I would like to present myself. My name is Gordana Stamenic. I'm State Secretary in Ministry of Justice and Public Administration from Republic of Serbia. I would like to say that Serbia is aware of importance of inclusion civil society in process of drafting of action plan. And Serbia also aware of importance of institutionalization, cooperation with the civil society. And so several years ago, exactly 2011, Serbia established its office for cooperation with civil society. That is the reason why is delegation of Serbia consists of members of both institutions, from Ministry of Justice and Public Administration and government's office for cooperation with civil societies. And I would like to give a floor the member of our delegation from office of with the cooperation with for cooperation with civil society, who will explain us about measure we took about drafting plan for open government partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Milena Banovic. I'm representative of the Government Office for Civil Society, for Cooperation with Civil Society, Government of the Republic of Serbia. Republic of Serbia is in the process of drafting action plan, OGP action plan, and Ministry of Justice, who's in charge for, who are responsible for open government partnership in Serbia, recognized our office as a partner in this process. And our aim is to suggest the mechanism of cooperation with civil society, and I will present very shortly what we did, and I will also ask a question for suggestions. At first we suggest open call for organization to suggest representative for working group for drafting OGP action plan. But at first we made consultation with civil society representatives, and they said that they can choose a representative for working group. Then we published open call for a civil society organization, both on the sites of the ministry and the website of the office, and then organized a meeting, consultative meeting, which aim was to elect representatives for working group. But on the meeting, organization said that our civil society is very big and very broad, and they can't choose one or two persons who will represent all of them. And then we decided for the other model. Before every meeting, we will, both ministry and the office, we will publish open call for the meeting, and with the topic of the meeting, for example, if we talk about transparency or open data, we will call organization who are able to or think they can give us a suggestion about that topic. And we also decided to make some form for suggestions, and after we made the first draft action plan, we will also publish it and open consultation process. And we will be very glad if you will share with us our experience in that, because we are beginners in this process. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that information from Serbia. And when it comes to this part of participation, how to interact with civil society, Helen mentioned also Council of Europe. We've got a range of multilateral organizations which also have a lot to offer in this discussion. is it easy to have from the national government, sort of national point of view, is it easy to interact with these multilateral organisations, or has anyone found a good way of making use of these assets that they can represent? Or perhaps if the Council of Europe or whoever might be present, you can give your views on this. Yeah, please. Oh, sorry. Can I come back to you? Because there's one lady here that asked for the floor first.
Yes, thank you. I'm Katju Holkeri. I come from the Finnish Ministry of Finance, where we also have the governance policy issues. And my comment was actually mostly to the fact how the open government partnership has added to what we have done previously. And I think one of the main thing is that it has kind of connected the different areas, plus added some extra, because we have been doing work on open procedures, which is one of our commitment areas, also previously for many years. But now it has linked this work with the open data work. So we work much more closely with the people who work with open data issues in Finland, as well as we have the government as an enabler. So we're trying much more to look also how we can work together with the civil society also to be away from not to burden the civil society too much. So we're trying to look at that issue, so it has brought that issue more to the agenda, the government as an enabler, plus that it has raised one particular issue which has not been so much on our open government agenda before. It has been worked in a particular Finnish institute, but it is the issue of clear language. And I think that's very important to us because, for instance, what was talked here earlier about legislation, there is it's not maybe a big thing when you say that one of our commitment areas, one of our commitment is that we should have a title for the legislation that is understandable and a resume that people can understand what is. So it's actually quite fundamental that people know what the legislation is all about. And we are not so good in our clear language. We have a lot of legislation that actually is very hard to participate or to take or to share your views if you don't know what the legislation is about, let alone to compliance to that legislation. So I think that's vital. Then maybe two issues that I think are quite big challenges to us. One was mentioned here is the evaluation. We worked a lot with OECD previously on open government, and this evaluation is always the tough thing because you always try to do a lot and then you rush into the next open government thing, but you have to evaluate what you have done previously. And I think here the independent reporting mechanisms and the OGB, I think it's good that it emphasizes the evaluation. So I think for at least we're trying to put more emphasis on doing better evaluation and better reporting than before, but it's still a challenge. And another challenge is that a lot of also in the open government partnership, our work concentrates on the national government, and the EU issue is a little bit maybe overlooked at some points. I think we should pay, at least we are trying to pay more attention to that in Finland, but it's a challenge because it concentrates more on for instance, the clear language on the national legislation and so on. So it's there's also, of course, the link to the EU. So thank you.
Thank you. That gentleman over there first, and then.
Thank you very much. Alfonso Zardi from the Council of Europe, precisely. So I happen to be in the right place at the moment. And thank you for the few references that were made to our organization. I would like to add maybe two pieces of information and one comment. The information is that in addition, so to speak, to the recent statements of the European Court of Human Rights, the organization has also produced a number of legal instruments. There are a few conventions on combating corruption, the civil law and penal law conventions on combating corruption, and two recent conventions on access to public documents, 2009, and on information and participation in the businesses of local authorities. The first convention was negotiated over many, many years, opened to signature in Norway in 2009, as has not yet entered into force because of relatively low number of signatures and ratification, which may be surprising, but still is the truth. So very few countries have signed and ratified, so not yet entered into force. The second convention on information about action of local authorities and participation in affairs of local authority has entered into force in 2012, has 8 or 9 ratification and many signatures, and it is a valuable tool for encouraging participation by not only by citizens or residents, but whoever is interested in the business of a local authority to take part in that. And there is a lot of measures that member states are, in a sense, bound to introduce to make this participation process possible. So this is an instrument not to lose sight of. The other comment is about the situation across our member states with regard to the impact of economic crisis and the ensuing reforms. We have studied the issue in the Council of Europe from the angle of precisely local authorities, because one of the major impacts that crisis has had has been on financing of local authorities, on resources given to local authorities. First of all, local authorities have been considered to be among the culprits because they spend too much, because the local finance is out of control. And this has introduced a number of restrictions on financing of local authorities and also on reduction of competencies and responsibilities of local authorities. And this has led to reforming the way in which the state is managed and the relationship between central government and intermediate tiers of government, regions and or local authorities. Many countries have done a lot of radical, even brutal reforms in that sense. Ireland is among those states. Spain is. Italy would like to be. Greece has gone through painful reforms in this respect. And Portugal has done the same. So the shift is now from economic recovery to institutional rewiring of the country. And I think that the point made by the Irish colleague is absolutely exact, absolutely perfect. My third point would be that in the Council of Europe, we are precisely paying attention to that. And it is perhaps a chance to be seized to see to what extent all the countries that are represented here are members of the Council of Europe as well. So the question is, how comes that in the Council of Europe, the same countries do not raise this issue? And the point could be that of dialogue and coordination. Ministries represented here do not have a seat in the Council of Europe. Ministries that go to the Council of Europe are ministries of justice, very often, sometimes occasionally ministries of finance, ministries of local government or interior, but very, very rarely ministries of reform or prime minister's office. So I think that the big challenge is also at domestic level to talk to each other and to know what is happening. We have a big challenge at the moment that we are precisely trying to redefine what the role of the Council could be as a hub for exchanging precisely this kind of information. And in the Committee of Ministers, there is a lot of resistance, there is a lot of reluctance. Maybe because at domestic level, there is not enough exchange of information on these issues, so that the chance, I think, that the Council of Europe offers as a forum where 47 European states meet and talk about these issues under the angle of the human rights, the protection of fundamental freedoms of the individuals, and not just citizens, basically. Yeah? So this chance is not overlooked. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's interesting. Thank you. That lady in front here.
I am Liia Hänni from Estonia, representing here Estonian Civil Society Roundtable. So my view is from civil society side. In Estonia it happens that civil society was actually pushing Estonian government to be a part of this new initiative. We saw that it is a good opportunity to innovate governance and to build new relations between government and civil society. And up to this moment, we are like a more active and interested party of this process. About action plan, it's a issue, what is a role of action plan, or what is a legal status of action plan? Because in our country we have several horizontal action plans which are related to open government, like information society action plan, anti-corruption strategy, action plan for civil society development, and is a OGP action plan some kind of umbrella or should it be like a separate strategy, but that means that also we should have legal status of the action plan, and it should be connected with budgetary process, otherwise it's simply empty words. So it still need to be clarified. And also about coordination mechanism, we still have a foreign ministry as a responsible person, but it's obvious that open government partnership is a domestic issue. It's an issue of democracy and governance innovation. And as in many countries we explored, also in Estonia, nobody is actually responsible for democracy innovations. There are, it's nobody's issue actually, and it should be somehow also supported, this understanding that we need to innovate democracy, maybe via OGP network. And the issue which was raised here also was about interrelationship between e-government and OGP. I see that it's very important that e-government and e-governance strategy should be combined with OGP. Otherwise, it will be simply use of technology for back office and for services, but to involve electronic democracy component, OGP is actually a very, very valuable instrument. And for future, in Estonia, we don't see that our roundtable and our network should be the only partner for our government to communicate with civil society. Our goal is mainly to build up a network that this cooperation between government agencies and civil society will be regular, will be multi-channel process, and actually our vision is that not only organized civil society, but in principle every citizen should be able to be part of political processes in our countries. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's one lady over there, and actually I have to remind you that we have 7 or 8 minutes left, so we're coming towards the close, but please.
Okay, everybody can hear me. My name is Victoria Vlad. I'm an economist with the independent think tank in Chisinau, based in Chisinau, Moldova. We happen to be involved with the OGP plan since the first round of consultations, and I would like to share some remarks to the discussions that I've heard today. First of all, an OGP should not be seen in isolation. It should definitely be seen as part of the larger agenda of opening up the government and in the end making citizens' life better. We had a consultation 2 weeks ago with somebody doing the independent research on the OGP implementation. And the question was, how did OGP change anything in Moldova? And we've learned it's done some work, it's done some progress. However, we've had a larger agenda of e-transformation, which started a bit earlier. So we should not try to lie ourselves that this is, for some countries definitely, like Germany, I keep saying that some countries don't even have those tools, and those who have it should definitely use it. But one thing that we should not overlook is that we should not try to mimic participation. So what I've learned from my involvement and my organization's involvement in all these consultations is that for lots of the governments, consultation with the civil society is a burden, because some already have done some decisions about how things are going to work and where, especially related to the budget process, where some of the funds are going to be allocated. So involving the civil society is only a burden. So I definitely see all governments' openness. So they say, we are really open, we want to involve the civil society. However, oftentimes this is just a burden for them. And one last thing, not mimicking participation, but also making whatever information you're putting up there, making it accessible, technically accessible, giving a bulk for people to download the information that you're offering, so not putting it in different files. So I know this is very technical, but for the work we're doing with the budget process and with the budget transparency, it's been very hard. So government, they're saying we're open and we're doing that work and we're really trying, but they're forgetting important technical aspects. And maybe one last thing is that we should also not forget, and maybe it's worth pursuing, including in the OGP plans, the building capacity of the ministries. Because what we've learned in Moldova, not only, so some ministries can see participation as a burden, also because they don't have the capacity to do these consultations. Placing a draft legislation on the website, this is not transparency. So we should agree on that. Just putting it up there on the website, this doesn't mean that you are open. Openness means making an announcement to the people and to the citizens that you know that are following your work. And also, one thing is that you should also look at the numbers. You should not lie to yourself, oh, I placed it on the website, it's amazing, I'm so open, I'm an open government, I'm an open government agency. Look at the people who are using your information, but also make sure that you're giving people information they can use to make their lives better and build those apps, and don't put obstacles in the work they're trying to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I've got two hands lifted, and you'll have the floor in a second. And just, I would like to remind you that if you are very specific on topics you would like to address in the future caucus for next year, it will be nice to hear that. And if anybody think they would consider hosting another conference, please give it a wink about that, and we'll have to not sum up, but we will close it in a few minutes. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm coming from Bulgaria. My name is Lou Alamanov, and I'm Chief of Cabinet of the Deputy Premier for Economic Development. I want just to put a stress on one specific theme that was coming directly from Helen's statement, almost through all people that said something. And this is the keyword communication. This initiative needs a little bit more communication. We are a relatively new government. We have been for just several months, and we found it very hard to find much information, not only in the society, but even in our administration. And we found that the initiative is not communicated very well. While we are doing things that we are proud of, like lowering the administrative burden, like taking care of the offshore companies, I see that a lot of countries are doing very good and very positive things. So I really think that one of the commitment, not only for us, but almost for all countries, is to communicate better, not only on international level, but even inside the countries, even within the administration, what is the real philosophy of this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A quick word from lady over there.
My name is Marianne Delzenne. I'm from the Netherlands, and representing civil society is a big word. I don't. I'm a member of Center for Budget Monitoring and Citizen Participation in the Netherlands. But I'm getting a little bit stressed from this meeting because I think we have to get a follow-up. So what you hear is experiences, you hear questions, and you say we only got 7 more minutes now. It will be 3, I guess. So I two. Okay, so I would strongly recommend a follow-up. And I know that for all of us it's a big problem because it's also a money issue. And yesterday we heard from Mo Ibrahim that his organization is giving more money than the whole OGP together. But I would strongly suggest to us all to get a new date. So please, let's make one.
A good final comment. I have to close the debate just now, and I think we heard a lot of interesting comments, and I won't try to sum up, but I mean, one particularly interesting point, I think, is the point made about, as I heard it, a lack of inner consistency between different ministries in each country, and the interaction between the national level and the transnational level, whether it be the EU, as Helen was talking about, or the Council of Europe, or whatever. So there's a lot of problems that we might still have to discuss here. Thank you so far. I've promised Permia from the OGP support group to have just a quick word at the end.
Hello, everyone. Just want to take a few minutes of your time to ask a favor. Some of you have these input cards. Some of you came in after I distributed them. I'm going to leave them on a chair right by the door as you go out. Please pick one up if you don't have one. Could you just fill this out for us? I'm asking on behalf of the OGP support unit. My company, Center for Nonprofit Strategies, is doing a project with the support unit to help them structure their work better, and we'd like your input as to what's valuable to you. Once you have filled this card out, and there's also room to write open comments on it, we're having office hours today on the 3rd floor from 12 to 2. We'd welcome any sort of verbal input that you would like to give us, any conversations that you would like to share with us. And there's also at the 3rd level, there's a big green box at the OGP desk. Once you're done with your card, if you could just slot that into it, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
That's all, folks. Thank you so much for this session.